Hey gang, we're in Ithaca, New York now. Very beautiful little city here. Actually, it's a good sized city, but if you're into hiking and adventures and outdoors and waterfalls and all kinds of stuff, and the home of Cornell University, this is the place to come. And speaking of Cornell, call it the King Astronomer of Cornell. We are here to see the grave of billions and billions and billions of stars, the starman himself, Carl Sagan, a big hero of mine. So let's get on with the walk. We're up on the bluff here. Let's take a look around and walk to his grave, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. Very fascinating, probably one of the most fascinating men, in my opinion, that has lived in our lifetime, my lifetime, and he's a big hero of mine. Well, he wasn't born anywhere near here. Of course, he's here because of Cornell, and we'll talk about that. But let's talk about the magical life that he had. He was born on November 9th, 1934 in Bensonhurst, which is a neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York, and his father, Samuel, was an immigrant. He was a garment worker, and they were from what was then called Russian Empire, today Ukraine, and let's say a prayer for Ukraine, all the bad things that are happening. But he came from there. His mother, Rachel Molly Gruber, was a housewife from New York, and they lived in a very modest apartment there. Now, Carl's advanced intellectual abilities were very apparent at a very, very young age, and his dad and mom took notice. They took him when he was little to the 1939 New York World's Fair. He was just absolutely blown away and fascinated, and it would be a turning point in his life that early. All those futuristic exhibits stimulated his interest and imagination, of course, as many. One of the things that stood out to him was the new technology that would replace radio, which was called television. Now, he was very inquisitive about nature. His first trips to the public library alone at the age of 7, after his mom got him a library card. And he wanted to learn what the stars were all about. Kind of a funny story that he would relate, and I think others have related, that he went up to ask the librarian, because nobody could answer us questions about the stars. He wanted to learn about what are the stars? What are those things? And she said, "Oh, I'll be right back." And she went and she got a book, Clark Gable and some actress, like a movie star book. And he's like, no, stars, like up there. So she's like, "Oh, okay." So he got his first book on stars, and I think at the library, he literally consumed that book. He read the whole book. So he was off to a fast start. He was. He learned that the stars were suns, but so far, far away, they were just little pinpoints of light. And the scale of the universe suddenly opened up to him. He said it was kind of a religious experience. So he would make trips, 7 years old. He'd go to the American Museum of Natural History across the East River in Manhattan. He'd go to the Hayden Planetarium there. Of course, that was big for him. Walk around and look at the museum exhibits, and just was in awe. And his parents just kept nurturing him. They loved it. They kept buying him chemistry sets and reading materials. They really did a great job in inspiring and feeding his interest. His interest in space, however, was his primary focus. Of course, reading the science fiction stories of the day, H.G. Wells, Edgar Rice Burroughs. Was there life on Mars? Everybody thought there might be life on Mars. I go all the way back to an astronomer. Now, I am an astronomer, don't laugh, but I don't have my telescopes anymore, but I got up to the 12-inch Schmidt-Cassegrain and did photography of deep space nebulas and all. I did all that stuff, and it's kind of a thing where you just can't stop, and you get to a level, and then you run out of like technology. So I remember a guy named Percival Lowell. I think I've got his name right. You know, and all these old astronomers, he was a big proponent of, you know, there were people on Mars, the canals, but we could only see so much, right? But he was fascinated with that. And then you have all the flying saucers and all of that stuff going on. I remember, do you guys remember the National Enquirer? All the mass hysterias, the flying discs, the aliens, what do they look like? And all the pictures they would make. The little green men. Well, Carl would end up going to the University of Chicago, and this is what's really neat. He did this, his college thesis was on the planet of Venus. Now, it just so happened in 1962 that Mariner 2 was being launched, and I don't know if it was the exact same time, but I think I got his paper done. He was kind of being recognized as kind of the expert on a lot of things, but Venus already, you know. And he said, you know, everybody's like, oh, it's got jungles and dinosaurs and all kinds of prehistoric animals. And he was like, no, I think it's a greenhouse effect wasteland. And people, you know, they actually interviewed him on TV, this young Carl Sagan. And he went out on a limb and he said, this is what I think it is. Sure enough, the spacecraft goes there, the probe, and that's basically what it finds. And he becomes kind of a celebrity. Not a celebrity yet, but he becomes really well known. And now people want to talk to him. 27 years old he was on network TV. That's pretty good. And then NASA called. We want that young guy. Now, NASA was just kind of had been formed. It was the Cold War, and that was kind of our answer to the Russians, and the Sputnik goes up. And it's like, we gotta get into this. We want to put a man on the moon. And Carl's interest, though, mainly was extraterrestrial life. And, you know, the conflict is that in those days, if you were you were big into science, you start talking about that kind of stuff, spaceships and aliens, you would be ostracized. And he already was getting like flack. So he's at Harvard, and by the way, back then, I don't know if it's like that now, but back then they were pretty snobby, pretty uptight, these astronomy professors, and they already didn't like him. They were like, who is this guy? And he's getting out of bounds. So all the other scientists would avoid the subject. Life on Mars, we don't talk about that. Or other life, that would be worse. What are you thinking? Look at this, an interesting mausoleum here with a huge wrought iron. Looks like just a cross. Very interesting. Let's take a quick look down there as we talk. So, Harvard, you know, so he's at Harvard, and he doesn't get tenure. Like, he's one of the leaders, and he's like getting snobbed and snubbed. So he's like, Cornell University right here, they're like, we'll scoop them up. Frank Drake. You ever hear of Drake? Drake's equation? Oh man, I love it. We're talking ET. We're talking, let's think. Let's open our minds up. So this was a perfect place for Carl to come and basically just opening up his, letting him flourish. Now this says Cornell. So of course Cornell University, I'm sure you can look on Find a Grave. I'm just wandering here, but this has got to be the founders of Cornell, right? Yeah, I can't really see in there, but yeah, last name's Cornell. Let's see if we can get a little look here. Yeah, it's beautiful stained glass. I see a Franklin Cuthbert Cornell, 1934. Very interesting. So this is the Cornell people. Yeah, this is Cornell, guys. We are fantastic university, responsible for, well, training and educating some of the bright minds. Miller, Margaret, William, and Emma. All right, let's continue on towards Carl's grave. So life gets more exciting. He's at Cornell here with Frank Drake, and he ends up becoming the director of the Department of Planetary Sciences, and he's really close to Drake. Now Drake is one of the revolutionary thinkers that Carl associated with himself with, and others. But what's cool, I don't know if you ever heard of the Drake equation, but something that really fascinated me many years ago is it's basically a deduction formula, and I'm not going to get into it. It's pretty complex. Well, it's not really complex, but it's like, to talk about it here, I'll try to put it in layman's terms. Basically, if you take all the known, what you can see or see through, even the telescopes of the day, how many galaxies, and you say, like, how many stars is that? And you start deducing down and say, okay, of that, 1% of those has planets around them. And then of those, 1% has biological life. And then you keep deducing down. And when you just take, what's fascinating is when you just take the stars that we can see, it says, like, and I'm making up numbers here, just metaphorical. There's 100,000 Earths out there. Now with Hubble, now we know, this is after Drake, that there are billions and billions of universes, each with billions and billions of stars. So it's beyond comprehension. And anyone who doesn't think there isn't intelligent life out there beyond, the equation basically goes, it takes it all the way to intelligent life, and then intelligent life like us, and then you keep deducing down and you say intelligent life far superior to us, and you still end up with huge numbers. The problem is distance. It's too far. Thousands of light years. Henry A. Bishop, Company 151st Regiment, New York Infantry, 1842-1931. Thank you for your service. The veterans, we got to recognize the veterans, guys. So, lots of cool stuff happening for Carl at Cornell here. And lots of things happening with NASA. He's kind of doing both. And now Apollo 11, we're landing on the moon. Carl's part of the briefing team. And Mariner 9 is orbiting Mars. Finally get there. And now they say Mars may have had life. Pioneer missions begin, the edge of our solar system and beyond. And Carl is the one who put the message on the ship. It was a little square picture the female and a male and other symbology in case it would run into, you know, extraterrestrial life, because once it gets beyond our solar system, it just keeps going. Yeah, basically to infinity. July 20th, 1976, Viking 1 lands on Mars. Good pictures, but no life. He's on the Johnny Carson show now. Billions and billions and billions. He was a hit. He made the record disc for Voyager. Again, all the sounds of Earth. What if somebody found this extraterrestrial? How can we best portray who we are? It's like a record album. And then he met there during that program, the program director, Andrienne, and they fell in love. They got married September 1980, and boy, I remember this. 13-part TV program, Cosmos, one of the most, if not the most successful public television program in history. 400 million people watched it. And then the famous picture, a famous picture sent back to Earth. It shows Earth as a little tiny blue dot on like a light beam. And that's us from the edge of our solar system. Shows you how small we really are. But Carl's big thing was he would make it easy for everybody to understand. And that was his revolution. That was where he really stood out. He put it in layman terms and made it fun and easy we could all understand. I got to tell you, when I first read the book Cosmos, it blew me away because there was one part. Remember, you know, I always talk about time dilation. And I was like, holy cow, time dilation is real? That's real? Yeah, it's real. So I really got into it. That guy really inspired me. And of course, the movie Contact, Jodie Foster, that's his other book. They made a movie about it. If you haven't seen Contact, go see Contact. I think I've seen it 10 times. It is basically his mind's eye of what happens and what's out there. And when we figure out a way or we make contact with superior intelligent life. So this guy he was something else. His grave is right up ahead here. I'm climbing uphill, so a little out of breath. He was not a fan of the space shuttle program. You know, that just seemed like a big waste of time. And as you look back on it, how much have we really learned from that when we could have been spending the money on interstellar stuff? So I agree with him on that. He was not a fan. Now, unfortunately, his wife noticed one day that he had a bruise on his arm, and he would go to the doctor. This bruise was not going away, and at first they thought they mixed the blood samples up. They're like, this blood is from a man who's in trouble. This couldn't be Carl Sagan. And they did it again, and it's like, it's him. It was a rare blood disorder, myelodysplasia. Gave him 6 months to live. But his sister was able to, she was a perfect match. So she was able to give him bone marrow transplant, number 1. Very, very painful. Survived it. Had to do it again. Grueling procedure. And he stretched out a little bit longer. And I just kind of stumbled here. It's his grave. I almost walked past it. Carl Edward Sagan. Wow, look at that. The man himself. Boy, oh boy, it's, for me, it's really special to be standing here to see this man. This guy was one of a kind. I believe these are his, the parents. His father, Samuel, Rachel, Molly Gruber. Well, it's too bad because at the end there, it was the movie with Jodie Foster, Contact. And they were making the movie, and he was part of it. He was even going to do a cameo as one of the board members. I always thought the guy, the guy who, if you've seen the movie Contact, there was the guy who was in the spaceship that made the extra, the first one blown up, and then they made the second one, and he was like this guy in the shadows and the gravity upside down. I always thought that was Carl Sagan, but it wasn't. But he was like really part of it, and it was cool that he could see the fruition, but sadly he died December 20th, you see there, 1996. That was just around 6.5 months before the movie came out. So that was, gosh, I wish he could have seen that movie. Oh, of course he's watching that movie from heaven. He was only 62. But anyway, Carl Sagan, man, an inspiration to all, an inspiration to me. Rest in peace. Rest in peace, Carl.